for the hastening of the reappearance of the Master, the Savior, the Avenger, Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, and to offer our condolences to the Imam of our time, and to seek the intercession of Abu Abdullah Hussein on the day where no money or family avails. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala. Today, I thought I'd talk about a really important topic that relates to our discussions over the last few days, and that is how to be rich. And no, I'm not talking about becoming financially affluent. I'm not talking about accumulating financial wealth. I'm speaking about the feeling of being rich. Even those who accumulate money, they do so because of inherent and intrinsic insecurities that they have. Obviously, there is an element of greed that would push someone to have the desire to become the world's first trillionaire, an amount of money that dwarfs the annual budgets and GDPs of 50 countries. There's definitely greed that plays a big part in the pursuit of wealth and money. But part of it has to do with insecurities. It has to do with the fear of not having the means with which I can be happy and content. Now, the problem with that is, of course, money doesn't bring you contentment. It doesn't alleviate those fears. It doesn't reduce any of those insecurities. If anything, it increases them. Hence the hadith of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, which in the most articulate and beautiful ways, the Imam explains what money does to people, where he says, إِنَّمَا مَثَلُ الدُّنْيَا كَمَثَلِ مَاءِ الْبَحْرِ. The example of this world and the dunya and money and wealth and fame and so on is like seawater. It's like salt water. كُلَّمَا شَرِبَ مِنْهُ ازْدَادَ عَطَشًا. The more you drink salt water, the thirstier you become. In fact, scientifically speaking, they say that for every liter of salt water that you consume, you need 2 liters of fresh water just to process and filter out all the salt. And so the more you drink, the thirstier you become, the more dehydrated you become, and therefore you end up dying of thirst. That's why people who are shipwrecked, they know better than to drink from the water they find themselves surrounded by. And they understand that if they drank from it, it'll only make them thirsty. So they have insecurities, they try to cover and fill those insecurities by adding more and more to their net worth and their portfolios and so on. But notice something that happens when you become ultra rich. One thing that distinguishes the richest people from the rest of society, despite the fact that their insecurities only continue to grow, is that they become extremely sensitive about who they hang with, who they accompany. Even their homes, they will install state-of-the-art security equipment. They will have barbed wires for a fence. In fact, they will try to hide where they live. I went to this community in the US, and there was somebody who lived there, and so he was sick. I went to visit him. And what I noticed about this gated community is that none of the houses had numbers. Wherever you go around the world, there's a plaque, there is some kind of a sign, there's a number that is given to each house to make it easier for people to find the house. But these houses within that gated community were built for the uber rich. They were built for people who are like, athletes and quote unquote stars, celebrities, and people who are extremely affluent. And so they didn't have numbers because guess what? They don't want people to know where they live. If you know, you know. If you're invited, then they will give you directions. But otherwise, they don't want people to know where they are. What does that mean? Number one, they're scared. They don't want people to have access to them, especially because they're famous and you never know which random freak will want to come and disturb your peace. But also, and I want you to think about this, it has to do with the fact that when you're that rich, you don't feel like you need other people. Isn't that true? Why would you need somebody else? Of course, they have their own social circles and whatnot, but generally speaking, their need to socialize, their need to impress other people, their need to fit in, their need for validation, and their need for recognition disappears because they feel that they have what they need within their businesses and their families and their portfolios. That's the kind of richness, or at least something similar to it, is what I'm referring to. Notice what the hadith says. It's a dua that we make toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we say, Allahumma ij'al ghinaya fi nafsi. Oh Allah, make me rich. I think if you gave this to an AI model and wanted the statement to be translated, or even an accredited translator, they'd probably translate it as, oh Allah, make me content. But that's not what the dua is saying. Contentment is qana'ah. It's when I feel that I've got enough, right? The dua says ghinaya. In Arabic, if we wanted to say someone is rich, we say, هذا غني. What does the word ghina mean? Mind you, not ghina, which is singing and music and so forth, but ghina. Ghina literally translates to a feeling of self-sufficiency. It is when I don't need other people. Now, that makes the concept relative. It means that someone who has an income of, I don't know, $10 billion, they might feel self-sufficient. More often than not, they don't. That's why they keep pursuing more and more money. And I have plenty of examples to provide. But in the interest of time, we'll move on. It doesn't make them self-sufficient. But then you have someone who's got the bare minimum. Someone who earns $30,000 in this part of the world, 30,000 pounds, for instance. And they might feel self-sufficient. And so there's a subtle difference between that and contentment. Because you could have a lot less than that and still feel content. But you won't feel self-sufficient. So when the dua says, Allahumma ij'al ghinaya fi nafsi, it means, oh Allah, make me self-sufficient no matter what I have. And no matter what I don't have, I want to feel rich, despite on paper, my net worth, my assets, my portfolio doesn't reflect those of a rich person, but I want to feel rich. And by rich, as I said, we mean self-sufficient, which means that I don't need other people. Allahumma ij'al ghinaya fi nafsi. I want to share a couple more ahadith with you. When the hadith says, for instance, kun fin nas wa la takun ma'an nas, Live among the people, but don't be with the people. Don't be with the masses. Don't swim with the current. Don't follow them as if they're a herd of sheep and you're just one of those animals. This herd mentality shouldn't apply to you. Kun finnas, live among them. Don't be a goth and wear black lipstick and live in a cave. Don't be an outcast in the sense that you would live in complete physical isolation. This concept of becoming a monk and avoiding social interactions is rejected in Islam. Live among them, because ultimately we're social beings, as we said yesterday. You want to be around other people that you deliberately pick and choose and ensure that they have only a positive influence on you and whatnot. But at the same time, don't follow the rest of the herd. An example of that, which I think you can all relate to, is the vast majority of people either believe that God doesn't exist or act as though God doesn't exist. So even if they believe in some kind of a supernatural deity, but the way they lead their lifestyles is completely independent of and disconnected from belief in a force that dominates their lives, a force that tells them, a creator that dictates to them the best way they should adopt as their lifestyle, right? Somebody once told me, he goes, I don't think God would care how I lead my life, who I should love and who I should live with and what I would do with them and whatnot. God is too great, which is a satanic misconception. God is too great. He's too sublime. He's too lofty. And the Quran and the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt tackle this problem in innumerable passages where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I am closer to you than your jugular vein. Yes, God is sublime. God is ineffable. God is incomprehensible. God is great in every sense of the word. But God also cares. God is close to you. And so my response to him was, in addition to those passages, I said to him, isn't it interesting that the government, which is also big and great and powerful, cares how many miles per hour you should be driving down this road that leads to your house? That's why they have rules, they have policies, they have signs, they have road markings to tell you how fast you're allowed to drive, to tell you where the curb is, to tell you where the pavement is, to tell you that this is a pedestrian crossing, to tell you that this is a red light, it's a green light, it's an amber light. The government, which deals with international crises and wars and the bigger questions in life, suddenly cares about how many miles per hour your car drives at. I said, how could God, the creator of the universe, who designed everything with infinitesimal precision and detail, not care about how I lead my personal life? Of course he cares. Of course it matters. And if God has rules that govern the universe in the most precise manner, surely he has rules for how I'm supposed to lead my life in my personal affairs. It's ridiculous to say that God cares about the big stuff, but not about the small stuff. You have so many people who either don't believe in God or who lead their lives as though God doesn't really exist. Do you follow the herd when it comes to the question of God's existence? Do you say, well, most people live like this, so be it. So I'm just going to swim with the current and go with the flow? No, you don't. Why? Because you say to yourself, let the whole world deny God's existence. I know for a fact that he does. I know not just through logical arguments and scriptural proofs, but also my lived experience that God exists and He's in control. As we say in the dua, أنا واثق من دليلي على دلالته. I have absolute certainty in the proof that establishes your existence. Imam Zayn al-Abidin says in the dua, معرفتي يا Allah دليلي عليك. My gnosis, my understanding is my proof that you are there, that you exist. So, what's happened here? There's a bit of a disconnect, there's a divergence in the rest of the world and their beliefs and their practices and my own. In other words, in this instant, my position is to hell with the rest of the world. That's the theme of our discussion since the beginning. To hell with it. So what? Whether people choose to believe in God or not. I make the rational choice to believe in God, and I don't care what other people have to say about that. I have sufficient evidence for myself, and that's enough for me. And so when I have this gnosis, it should drive me to contravene and walk in the opposite direction of the entire society. That is a principled stance. That is you making a bold statement to the rest of the world that my beliefs that have been firmly established dictate my behavior, not what you think or believe or do. I'm an independent, rational, thinking individual. And my belief has led me to this fact, and I will not abandon this fact no matter what happens. Abil Fadl Abbas Salamullah alayh says something. I remember years ago I did a whole lecture where I took passages from the statements made by the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, which all, the gist of which is the same message here. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas famously declared on the day of Ashura, what? When they cut off his right hand. He said, Wallahi in qata'tumu yamini, inni uhami abadan an deen. Wa an imamin sadiq al-yaqeen. If you cut off my hand, not just fail to recognize me, not just gawk at me, not just stare and smirk and mock and treat me with disdain and in a patronizing way. No. If you go all the way through and cut off my hand, Wallah, in qata'tumu yamini, inni uhami abadan an dini wa an imami. I will defend my religion, come what may. And I will defend my Imam, my Master, Abi Abdullah al-Hussein, Salamullahi alayhi. So, my message to you, my respected sisters, may Allah bless each and every single one of you. You are the ones carrying the grief of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein on these 10 days and nights. You are the ones who defy all the odds. I get it. People hate it when they see those people who have a problem with God, those people who want to express their hatred towards divine messages. One of the easiest things for them to do, and perhaps the first thing they will do, is that they will show and exhibit that vitriol towards the symbol of faith and the symbol of belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you wear around your body every day. I can't say I fully understand what you go through, but I will say that I truly appreciate. And by appreciate, it's not my appreciation or validation that you seek, but appreciate in the sense that I admire that. I admire the fact that you would defy all the odds and you would go against this very powerful current that's currently raging around the world. It used to be white supremacists, now it's Shahanshahis, and tomorrow it's somebody else. There's always someone who's gonna try to attack what they perceive as the weakest link, as the most accessible means of showing their hatred by attacking you. And these attacks might take a physical form, which happens sadly and tragically every once in a while. But I think the biggest battle is not what happens on the street, but what happens on social media. Because on the one hand, you have people who say that this needs to be banned, it needs to be stopped, it should be restricted. Many countries have even taken the absolutely insane step of preventing women from wearing hijab in public schools and universities and government buildings and so on. But I think of an even bigger challenge than that is when you have people who wear the hijab but defy the standard of hijab. Honestly, it baffles me when I see women who pose for videos and clips that they make that have a connection to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Whether it be they happen to be doing ziyarah, or they're reciting eulogies, or them speaking about Imam al-Hussein with more makeup that they can put on their wedding night. It baffles me how they're able to reconcile between one and the other. And so I can imagine with these women, without passing any judgment to their character and their faith and devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the love towards Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, I'm not judging that. I'm judging one very specific aspect of their conduct. And I have every right to judge that. And you have every right to judge it. Because that's the part that we see. And that's the part that is blatantly and expressly haram. There's no ifs or buts about it. It is haram. Pick any marja, pick any risala, and they'll tell you that beautification in public, and there's nothing more public than social media. If I walk out on the street today, how many people are going to see me? With makeup, without makeup? How many people? The exposure is much more limited. But going on social media, the whole idea is to get exposure. The whole point is to have more likes and more validation and more comments. I'm trying to show myself. And what kills me is the tens of thousands of likes and people commenting and saying, MashaAllah, how beautiful, ma'jura, this, that. In other words, it's not what they do which bothers me the most. It's the fact that it's becoming normalized. It's the fact that people don't see that this is wrong, that this hurts Imam al-Hussein. This drives a dagger through the heart of Lady Zainab. I'm trying to please them or I'm trying to hurt them. Which is it? And if I try to do both at the same time, then I am most definitely hurting them. Most definitely. I don't care how many speeches I give and talk about, oh, I saw nothing but beauty, which is literally the only thing they seem to have picked up from the message of Lady Zainab alayhi salam. Not her hijab, not her salah on the night of the 11th of Muharram, Salatul Layl. Not the fact that her greatest tragedy was the fact that she was put under a limelight and had people scanning her face while she was on the journey from Karbala to Kufa and then to Sham. None of that gets much exposure. What gets the exposure? I saw nothing but beauty. When you don't even understand what I saw nothing but beauty means. It's a comment that she made to an enemy. She's trying to destroy his morale. She's trying to tell him that you tried to break us. But what Imam al-Hussein did, what his companions did, and what the legacy that we carry on our shoulders will lead to millions of people finding guidance and being led towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I saw nothing but beauty. so let me show my beauty. It just baffles me, honestly. And so don't be surprised when this aspect of your religiosity is attacked. You hardly find people attacking your salat, right? You never hear people saying that we should ban prayers in the workplace or at school, because it's not as visible, it's not an act that is a clear defiance of their values and their principles. Which is to say, you shouldn't be submissive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You should do whatever you want. You should show skin. You should let people see what you look like. Look at two news anchors. I don't know if you've noticed this before. You see the man dressed up fully, a suit and a tie and all the rest of it. Then the woman sitting next to him, there's gotta be a good few feet of her skin. I don't know what the measure is for amount of skin that's shown. I'll just go with feet. That are exposed. Why? Because that's what they want to do. They want to subjugate the woman by getting her to expose herself. That's why they're against hijab. Colonial powers went to Muslim countries, invaded and occupied Muslim lands, and they would report back to their country, whether it was France, Belgium, whatever, and they would say that we need to get rid of the hijab. Because the hijab is an act of defiance. The hijab is something that is a symbol of resistance. Hijab in its true sense, not hijabi style, not the kind of hijab that somehow manages to bring together all of these contradictions. The full face of makeup, but also something that covers a few strands of hair. No. The true hijab where you're not able to pour through and peek through this individual's personality. That I can't even tell her reactions when I speak to her. This kind of hijab needs to be eliminated, they said. There are actual documents and letters that show the correspondence between the colonial powers, their agents, as well as the governments that they represented. So, don't be surprised when it's attacked. Whether it's attacked through policy, through hooligans and thugs on the street, or more dangerously, when it's attacked in a more subtle way, where a different version of hijab is presented to you. Oh, your hijab looks so beautiful, but isn't that the whole point? That I don't attract attention? I'm not wearing hijab to look beautiful. I'm wearing hijab so you would look away. You monster. I don't want you to see me. That's the whole point of hijab. Don't be surprised when it's attacked, because it's that valuable. It's that precious. I'll give you a couple of examples and wrap up, inshallah, about feeling rich, self-sufficient. I don't need people's recognition or validation. I don't need people to tell me how beautiful I look. I know I'm beautiful. And I'm beautiful for myself. I'm beautiful for my family. I'm beautiful for my husband. And that's all that matters. I don't need other people outside of this circle to think I'm beautiful. Abu Dhar, Salamullahi alayhi. There are two statements I want to mention. One is when he was leading a movement against the third Khalifa, Uthman. One night, and it's a hadith by Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. The Imam says that Uthman sent two people to him. And they were slaves, apparently owned by Uthman. He set them at night where no one was watching, and they knocked on the door. Abu Dhar came out. They offered him a handsome amount of money. Now, generally speaking, I'm sure you would agree, if somebody gave you money and a lot of it, people don't tend to ask too many questions, am I right? Like if somebody comes up to me and says, here's 50,000 pounds, I probably wouldn't ask too many questions. maybe where is it from? What's it for? And if it turns out that there are no strings attached, right, that people don't know about this, perhaps if it's illicit. So they came to him and they said, we've got something for you. Abu Dhar said, what? They said, it's from the Khalifa, and it's a large bag filled with gold coins. Just the sight of that gold makes people just bedazzled. So they said to him, take this. He said, where is it from? Is this money from the Muslim treasury? Is every single Muslim receiving the same amount? It's a payout by the government to help the people. They said, no, this is just for you. He said, where is it from? Because if it is from the Muslim treasury, then everybody should get an equal share. They said, no. Uthman says, إِنَّهُ مِن صُلْبِ مَالِهِ. This isn't just from my money, because you could argue that his money was derived from illicit means, that he got this money because he's the Khalifa. And so they were more specific. They said, this is from his actual money. This is what belongs to him personally. It's from his personal coffers. Abu Dhar said, no. Because he knows that in this transaction, there is a price being paid in exchange for something. And that something was obvious to him. I will sell my soul, and you will get my silence in exchange for this money. Even if that's not stipulated in the contract, it's obvious. Because when someone pays me, and he pays me a large sum of money, surely I'm going to stop attacking him in public. Surely after a while, this money will help me build a better, more comfortable lifestyle. And so I will become accustomed to a higher standard of living. And at that point, I will expect more money to come in to maintain that standard of living. And so whoever gave me the money, I'm not going to attack them. I'm not going to criticize them because I'll want more. Abu Dhar said no. So as he was standing by the door, those two individuals, they peeked inside the house and they saw the children of Abu Dhar who were agonizing from hunger. There was a tiny loaf of dried bread, and they were trying to break pieces of it to try and satisfy themselves. So they looked at Abu Dhar, they said to him, Ya Abu Dhar, innaka faqir. Take the money, man. Just feed your family. Imam al-Sadiq says, Abu Dhar responded by saying, Innani ghani. No, I'm rich. Remember? The feeling of self-sufficiency. Being rich inside of you. They told him, Ya Abu Dhar, we can see your life. We can see that you're struggling. What are you talking about? Abu Dhar said to them, listen, Allah hates the one who lies. I didn't lie when I said I'm rich. Rather, what I meant was this, إِنَّنِي غَنِيٌّ بِوِلَايَةِ عَلِيِّ ibn Abi Talib. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. I am not poor. I am rich thanks to my allegiance to Ali ibn Abi Talib. In other words, my love and allegiance and fellowship of Amir al-Mu'mineen gives me the feeling of being rich, the feeling of self-sufficiency, the feeling that I don't need anybody. I have Ali. I have my Imam. That's what matters to me. Anyway, time passed. It got to the point where Abu Dhar was forced into exile. And on his way out, Amir al-Mu'mineen, I referenced this on the first night, Amir al-Mu'mineen came to Abu Dhar. Listen to what he said to him. I didn't mention this bit. He said to him, Ya Abu Dhar, أخذوا منك الدنيا. They took the dunya from you. They took all the means of comfort from you. وما أحوجهم لما منعتهم منه. They took the dunya from you and you took something else from them. but boy, are they in need of what you took from them. And how self-sufficient are you? وَمَا أَغْنَاكَ عَمَّا مَنَعُوكَ مِنْهُ. You don't need what they took from you, but they so desperately need what you took from them. They took the dunya from you. You don't need the dunya because you're rich. And you took from them the akhirah. You took from them the ability to see the truth. You didn't take it from them. They took it from themselves. They lost it on their own. They have no one else to blame but themselves. But you don't need what they took from you because you're rich. Ma aghnak. And how desperate are they for what you took from them? So Imam Zayn al-Abidin salamullahi alayh, he says in the sermon that he delivered in Kufa, in Sham, when the person speaking on the pulpit got up and praised Yazid and slandered Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, what did the Imam say to him? This is a statement you've heard 1,000 times. Remember, the Imam said to him, اشتريت سخط الخالق برضا المخلوق. Look what you've done to yourself. You've just engaged in a transaction where you have purchased the pleasure, the happiness of the created being, but in exchange you have angered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You've received the validation and the recognition and the status and so on from the created, but you have lost your chance with the Creator. Ammar ibn Yasir comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen in Siffin. And there was a particular day, there was a night called Laylatul Harir, but there was also a day where the heat of the battle reached new highs and extremes. So Ammar comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen. He said to him, إِذَنْ لِي بِالْبِرَازِ يَا أَمِيرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, let me go and fight. So the Imam kept telling him, no, stay, it's not your time yet. Eventually he came to the Imam. He said to him, يَا أَمِيرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِنَّهُ الْيَوْمُ الَّذِي وَعَدَنِيهِ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. I can see the signs that were given to me by the Holy Prophet that my death is near. This is my moment. This is when I'm supposed to go. The Prophet had told him, يَا عَمَّارِ آخر زادك من الدنيا شربة من لبن أو رواح من لبن. The last thing you will eat in this world, you will consume in this world, is a cup of milk. And I can see all the signs around me that this is it. So the Imam gave him permission. It was painful for Amir al-Mu'mineen to let Ammar go. In fact, years later, Amir al-Mu'mineen would say, أين عمار? Where is my Ammar? The Imam was left feeling alone with Ammar gone. The Imam gave him permission to go. Ammar looked at Amir al-Mu'mineen one last time. He said to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Wallah, ma tabi'tuka illa ala basirah. I didn't follow you except because I had certainty that you are the means of salvation, that you represent the truth. Then he said to him, فَقَدْ سَمِعْتُ حَبِيبِي رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. I've heard from my beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi وآله أنه قال يا عمار إذا رأيت الناس تسلك واديا وسلك علي واديا آخر فاسلك الوادي الذي سلكه علي. Always remember this. He said, if you see people, Rasulullah said to Ammar, if you see people, every single person in existence, for all I care, heading in one valley, in one direction, and Ali ibn Abi Talib takes another valley, then follow Ali ibn Abi Talib and leave everybody alone. فإنه لا يهديك إلى ردى ولا يدلك على ضلال. Because Ali ibn Abi Talib will never lead you astray. Always follow Ali. He's your barometer. He's your North Star. He's your moral compass. Ali and Ali. Ali and Fatima and Hassan and Hussein. It's their example that you need to emulate. To hell with everyone else. And so Ammar goes, when Ammar was killed, Amir al-Mu'mineen came. Imagine, the Imam prayed Salatul Mayyit on Ammar with the entire army of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Tens of thousands of people all praying behind him. Then Amir al-Mu'mineen cried over his dead body. And he said, whoever is not moved by the killing of Ammar today, لَيْسَ مِنَ الْإِسْلَامِ فِي شَيْءٍ. He knows nothing about Islam. Knows nothing about the truth and falsehood. عمار وما أدراك من عمار تقتلك الفئة الباغية. That's another example from the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi alayh. I'll mention just one last one which is relevant. Ayman, you've heard her name. Perhaps in the nights of the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayh, her name is mentioned. Where? Do you remember? When Lady Zaynab alayhi salam says to her father while he was on his deathbed, that I've heard certain things from Ayman about what's going to happen to me and my brother Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. She doesn't want to open up the tragedy and overburden her father Amir al-Mu'mineen, and the Imam doesn't want to do that either. So they speak in symbols. Zaynab says, I've heard things from Ayman. Zaynab, the daughter of Fatima, heard this from Ayman, which tells you how important Ayman was. That she was the keeper of secrets from Rasulullah. And would then pass them on to Zaynab al-Aqila salamullah alayha. The Imam responded by telling her, Al-Hadith kama akhbaratki bihi Ayman. Yes, what you've heard from Ayman is true. Who is this Ayman? Ayman was a slave woman, an elderly woman. She defied literally everyone. The Khalifa is killing people left, right, and center. Salama was the wife of the Prophet. Salamullah ala Salama. But as a wife of the Prophet, she had a certain degree of immunity. They couldn't just kill her unless they assassinated her. And that was definitely a possibility. But Ayman had that status. Salama, excuse me. Ayman had nothing. She was a slave. And yet guess who comes to the court, faces the tyrant, and testifies to the truthful nature of the claim made by Fatima al-Zahra? Ayman does. She couldn't care less about everyone else. Couldn't care less about the consequences. She couldn't care less about the validation or recognition. She came and testified on behalf of Fatima al-Zahra. Wallah, anna Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wahaba fadakan libnatihi Fatima. Putting her life in danger. Last night I mentioned who? Yesterday I mentioned Asma bint Umays. Did you know that while she was married to Abu Bakr, who was not just her husband, but the Khalifa and the one in charge of the army, when he wanted to come and visit Fatima al-Zahra in order to show his face, in order to pretend like everything was okay between them, guess who was the first to stand in his face and say, you're not allowed to go? Asma bint Umays. Now that's an independent woman. That's a self-sufficient woman. That's someone who's careless towards the dunya and all the external factors and who might say what or do what. Anyway, lastly, you have this young bride. History doesn't tell us much about her. But just like any young woman who has just been married, she has her expectations, she has her wishes in life, she has her vision of what she would like to do, the family she would like to have, the children, the house, all these things that any ordinary person, especially an ordinary young woman, would want. Suddenly she finds herself on the plains of Karbala. One camp has Imam al-Hussein as the leader and a small band of supporters, and the other camp is not a camp, it's an ocean of men armed to the teeth. And her husband chooses to go and stand with Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Wahab al-Kalbi, salamullahi alayhi. She wasn't even a member of this community. She was a Christian. A few days prior to that, they meet Imam al-Hussein. The Imam speaks to their souls and they decide to embrace the truth right then and there, embrace Islam. Sure, they became Muslims, but now suddenly she's thinking to herself, I'm still a bride. I'm supposed to be in my honeymoon and I'm going to be a widow straight away. Listen to what the historians say. Wahab, because he had just been married and he was out perhaps on a journey towards a destination where he could have his honeymoon, he didn't even have a sword. And so when it was time for him to head into the battlefield, حمل قطعة من الخشب. حمل عصا. He carried a stick made of wood. Allahu Akbar. He heads towards the battlefield. He heads towards the battlefield and goes in while being cheered by his mother. His mother, wiser, older, and so didn't have what the wife of Wahab was feeling. And so she kept telling him, go and fight. He would fight for a little, come back and say to his mother, أَرَضِيتِ عَنِّي يَا أُمَّا? Are you pleased with me now? And she would say, لا والله حتى تقتل دون الحسين عليه السلام. Go. On the day of judgment, I want to be able to look into the eyes of Fatima al-Zahra and say, you lost your son, but so did I. So he would go back and fight again with a wooden stick, facing an army of 30,000 men with swords and spears. He fought while his wife kept telling him, Ya Habiba Fuadi, my sweetheart, honey, don't do this, don't get killed, I don't want to be left alone. But he kept fighting until at some point he heard his wife say, قاتل دون الطيبين فداك أبي وأمي. Fight in the way of these pure and noble ones. May my parents be ransomed for you. So he was surprised. He called out. In fact, they say that when he heard her say those words, he looked back and he saw his wife heading into the battlefield to fight the enemy herself. See what? She wasn't just cheering him on. She wasn't just asking him to go fight. She wanted to fight herself. So he asked her, he said, قبل ساعة, an hour ago, a few moments ago, you were telling me not to get killed, and now you're saying this. What happened to you? She said to him, يا وهاب إن واعية الحسين كسرت قلبي. The cries of Hussein broke my heart. He said, what did you hear him say? She said, رأيته واقفا بكسرة الخيمة بباب الخيمة وهو ينادي وقلة ناصرة. How little are those who are defending us. قاتل دون الطيبين يا حبيب فؤادي. Wahab called out to her to go back to the camp. She refused. So he asked Imam al-Hussein, Wahab has ghira. He said to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, Ya Abu Abdullah, arji'ha ila al-khiyam. So the Imam came out. He took her back to the tent until he fought bravely and fell to the ground. When he fell to the ground, his wife rushed to him. They say that she held Wahab in her arms, crying for him, saying, Ya qurrata ayni, Ya Habib Fuadi, أبلغ رسول الله عني السلام. And so the army of Umar ibn Sa'd, they saw this tragic scene. Umar ibn Sa'd called out to his soldiers. He said, ألحقوها بزوجها. Go and send her to her husband. So as she was holding him, someone came and struck her with the sword. And they celebrated their wedding in paradise. Now I say to you, O Wahab, O loyal companion of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. When you fell to the ground, your wife came to you to comfort you. Perhaps if you were still alive, you opened your eyes and you saw your wife's face. But did you know that only a few minutes or hours later, Abu Abdullah opened his face, only to see the face of Shibr ibn Dhil Jawshan. رحم الله من نادى وحسينا ومظلوما وغريبا. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. اللهم إنا نسألك وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم وبالحسين الغريب المظلوم السليب العطشان، عجل اللهم لوليك الفرج. اجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه وأتباعه وشيعته. ارزقنا في الدنيا زيارة الحسين وفي الآخرة شفاعة الحسين. اللهم ارزقنا نظرة إلى وجه الحسين في يوم القيامة يا أرحم الراحمين. إلى أمواتنا ومن مضى من هذا الجمع والعلماء والشهداء وخدمة أبي عبد الله الحسين عليه السلام، نهدي لهم ثواب المجلس وثواب سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.